if it isn't the one with the sauce.
And your dazzling voice makes me love.
As long as we can love, our voices will grow strong.
Kart. And of course, let's start with the earliest of the pre-release versions of the game, which dates back to June 10th, 1991, about a year before the initial release of the game in Japan. Now, it should also be noted that what was found in the GigaLeak was basically uncompiled code as well as some assets, and these were then used by certain members of the Super Mario Kart community to repair and rebuild these prototype builds. And as such, some aspects of these builds are educated estimations that were made in order to make them playable. So yeah, what's seen in these rebuilds may not be 100% accurate to what they were, but it's pretty dang close. On that note, when reconstructed and booted, this first build starts up with an incredibly basic menu with just two options: car as well as hover, both of which will start up a race with the racers driving in a cart or hovercraft respectively. Now, the kart drives fairly similar to how they do in the final game, but the hovercrafts control quite different. And internally in the coding, there's a comment referring to the style of driving for the hovercrafts as having F-Zero controls. And yeah, the elephant in the room, you'll immediately probably notice a big lack of Mario elements in this early version of Mario Kart, as each racer just takes on a generic driver sprite in one of three color schemes. And this actually checks out with what was revealed in an old Iwata Asks interview with one of Super Mario Kart's developers, Hideki Kono, who revealed that initially, the game just had a guy in overalls sitting in a cart, and it wasn't until 3 or 4 months after development on the game started that Mario was finally implemented into the game. When compared to the sprites used in the final game, it definitely looks like the kart part of the sprites were mostly unchanged, and honestly, the hovercraft sprites looked pretty cool in my opinion. This would have been awesome to see in Super Mario Kart as an alternate vehicle type or something. Now, there seems to be only one track that's playable between both vehicle types in this build, and although there's still no collision or anything implemented here yet, this track actually appears to be in early Mario Circuit 3, as they seem to have the same track layout. And also, I just recently learned that it's very likely that Mario Circuit 3's layout was actually based on a real raceway in Spain called Circuito de Jerez. And when comparing an overhead satellite view of that track with that of this early build, we can see that there are a few set pieces that seem to have been implemented in this early pre-release track. Now, this has never been officially confirmed as fact or anything, but personally, I think the similarities here are undeniable. But other than that, honestly, not too much else to say for this build, as it is incredibly basic. No audio, the other racers don't seem to function, you can't actually even complete a race or anything, and so on. But hey, it's still really cool that pre-Mario Mario Kart is playable at all. Then after this is a build dated 15 days later on June 25th, 1991, and already, although still pretty basic, we can see an updated menu. This time around, in addition to selecting between hover and kart, you can actually choose between 3 characters, all from the Mario series: Mario, Luigi, as well as Bowser. Well, I guess maybe only 2 characters depending on how you look at it, as Luigi actually goes back to his early roots of being a Mario palette swap. Yeah, the mandatory green Mario joke writes itself this time.
Luigi is a number 1.
And then finally on this menu, there's an option to choose between different maps, with the H and K's here believed to have been for dedicated hovercraft and kart tracks respectively. Now, unfortunately, there's only one track that was found in the GigaLeak dated around the time of this build, and it's once again the same early Mario Circuit 3 track, so it's believed that that course was going to be one of the 5 here. And as such, it's unfortunately currently unknown what the other 4 tracks may have been. And apart from adding Mario characters this time around, honestly, the kart race is pretty much the same as the previous build, since once again, you can't actually win or anything. And despite there still being a hover option on the main menu, it looks like the hovercraft sprites with the Mario characters might not have gotten completed for this build, or at least they weren't left in the Giga Leak, as selecting this option still just has the characters and carts. How the vehicle controls is once again different in this hover mode, so it looks like there still was a difference planned between the two. And before we get to the next build, a quick shout out to my awesome channel members like Wordy and running your finger down the middle of the keyboard. If you're enjoying the content, consider supporting the channel for as little as $2 and get access to extra channel perks like exclusive videos, emoji, and more. Click the join button below or check out the link in the description if you're on an Apple device for more info. Then moving on, the next known pre-release build was built on November 7th of 1991, and here we once again see an updated main menu. Here you can choose between various configurations of how you want to play, between using human players, computer players, or having one of the screen halves be a monitor screen. When in monitor mode, you can then also change what sort of view you'd like to have, including a rear view, a side view, which keeps the camera fixed at a certain spot, as well as not one, not two, but 4 different ways of displaying a zoomed out view of the track, including an isometric view, a top-down view, and then 2 more zoomed in top-down views with the player at the middle, similar to the Mario Kart DS's bottom screen map. One with the map rotating as the player turns, and then the other locked in place. What's also interesting about these map views in this build is that unlike the final cut of the game, here we can actually see map objects like Monty Moles, pipes, and more. And after those, there's one more option for the monitor view, and this one will not only display RAM information, but you'll also see these pipes pop up, which aren't normally visible in the top screen. And these pipes are actually indicators of checkpoint locations where the player would respawn if they were to fall off course or something. Then back to the menu. Thankfully, this build adds the rest of the characters that ended up being seen in the final cut. Yoshi, Toad, Koopa Troopa, Peach, as well as Donkey Kong Jr., here spelt with a C. And then finally at the bottom of the menu here is the Prog option, and this lets the user choose from a list of different game modes to play. First, we have a race mode, and finally, after 2 builds where it didn't really work, this build does actually have a functional race mode that's pretty complete, at least relatively. Here you can actually race against 7 functional computer players and actually finish a race which consists of 5 laps, just like the final game. Although there isn't a coin or life counter here yet, we do actually get to see the current placement of all the racers, which automatically updates. Kinda similar to how the top 4 racers are seen in Mario Kart 64. And this idea wasn't kept for the final release, instead only showing the placements of the racers as they finish the race. Oh, also, there are quite a few more courses implemented in this build, a total of 20 for the race mode in fact. Then after the race mode, we have Battle. Well, 2 different battle modes actually, and although they can't be switched between from this main menu, you can select which battle mode to play from another debug-like menu, which we'll come back to later. Anyways, the first of these 2 battle modes is internally referenced as Test, and when started up, you'll load into a pretty wide open battle map with 12 objects bouncing around the area. And as you've already likely noticed, these objects appear as 3D coins on the top half of the screen, and then red balls on the bottom half, which ended up getting used as the balloons in the final game's battle mode. Now these objects do have collision with the players, but only once, seemingly due to a bug. So after you touch one of these objects and they bounce off, they'll just pass through the players after. Now it's unclear exactly how this battle mode was going to function, with some theorizing that it could have been a mode where players were to try and grab as many moving coins as possible, or alternatively, with there being a checkered goal line right down the middle and the balls stopping after a while, perhaps a mode where the players were to try and bump as many balls as possible into their opponent's half of the field. Either way, there's no scoring system or anything for this mode, so again, there's no way to win this game for either player. And then secondly, there's a battle mode internally referred to as Gun. And this takes place in the same map, but this time, instead of the coins or balls bouncing around, each player will have an object behind them and will be able to fire them away as fast as they can. Or as fast as the Super Nintendo can handle, I guess. Now these objects behave similar to green shells, but they seem to have a shorter range as they will disappear after a shorter amount of time. Much like the other battle mode, there's no way to win this one or anything, but this actually seems to be the machine gun mode that was referenced in an old developer interview that was included in the official Japanese strategy guide for this game. And then last up for this last selection, we have 3 debug options here, ranging from ED1 to ED3, with ED seemingly short for edit. So first, of course, we have ED1. Now it's a bit complicated, but this is apparently a tool for editing various data for computer players, including their respawn points. Now there's a really good video made by Mr. L314 explaining how the AI works in Super Mario Kart, which if you're interested, I'll have it linked for you in the description below. Then, more interesting, in my opinion, is ED2, and this is actually more of a map editor, as it allows you to place in various objects on a course, including item panels, already used item panels, boost arrows, as well as these 4-block walls. So yeah, if you ever wanted to make some custom maps in this game yourself, this is a cool way to try it out in a pretty simple way. And then lastly, we have the ED3 menu, and this is the one I mentioned earlier, where you have to go to first and toggle the battle OBJ factor between 0 or 1 to enable the battle modes on the main menu, with 0 being the test mode and 1 being the gun mode. Then after that option, we have bound power, and this is a value you can edit which indicates how much objects bounce back after colliding with something. The greater the value here, the more the objects bounce when hitting a wall, or when hitting or getting hit by a player. After this, Mode 7 Char is a tile set viewer basically that just displays tiles for whichever map is selected on the main menu. Color Map similarly acts as a color palette viewer, which again seems to change depending on which course is selected on the main menu before going into this option. And then lastly, and frankly more odd, is the Mario option on this menu, which just loads up this screen featuring all 8 of this game's characters at an angle on a yellow background. It's currently unclear what exactly the purpose of this screen was, or if there's supposed to be anything more to it than just this. Now, at this point, you probably have noticed at least a few graphical differences here compared to the final cut of this game, including different sprites for the item box graphics at the start of a race indicating player number having a P, which is missing in the final version sprite, and in addition to some tile sets for the courses being different compared to their final counterparts, the tiles for the items are a bit different as well. In addition to lacking the flat 2D coins and oil slicks which weren't implemented at this point, the item panel graphics, both obtained and unobtained, appear rounded in this early build compared to the sharp corners seen in the final version. Then, although this build has a bunch of maps similar to how they appear in the final cut, a number of them actually have slightly to majorly different layouts here in this pre-release build. These changes often involve split paths, like here in this early version of Donut Plains 2, one in early Donut Plains 3, Mario Circuit 4 is quite a bit different, and much, much more. And yeah, as you can see, some of these differences are quite a bit more major than the others. And interestingly, there's also a pretty big difference seen in the Bowser's Castle tracks, as I guess before they ended up being replaced by the thwomps found there as hazards, the early versions of these tracks actually have these lava bubble fellas instead. And then lastly for this build, there are also some debugging features left over that can be activated via some button inputs, namely a mini RAM viewer, and then, most interestingly I think, an item debugging feature in a race, where after enabled, despite not itself being implemented in this build yet, a tile from the Boo item graphic will pop up in the top left of the screen. And when enabled, you can use several items to your heart's content, including using the feather with the Y button, green and red shells with the L and R buttons respectively, as well as unlimited star and mushroom usage with the X and A buttons. And yeah, as you might expect, this can make the races in this build an absolute breeze. And while on the topic of items, the lightning and Boo items seen in the final cut of the game aren't implemented in this build yet. And although not fully added, left over in this build are also remnants of the coin item, the poison mushrooms that ended up getting added as computer player only items for both Princess Peach and Toad, as well as actually an item that ended up getting scrapped in Super Mario Kart. Well, at least as an item, as leftover are remnants for a piranha plant item that players could drop behind them. And these piranha plants ended up getting added to this game as stage hazards instead. And yeah, it looks like they were left over with using green versions of the banana, star, and mushroom sprites as placeholders. And now, last up for the builds I want to cover, at least for this video, let's move on to a pre-release version built on February 13th, 1992, the first currently known one to be built that year. And yeah, right away you'll notice that the title screen is leaps and bounds ahead of what was seen in prior pre-release builds, or at least it's believed to have been. Again, remember that all of the graphics that were reused to rebuild this are a very educated estimate, but not necessarily 100% what it looked like. That said, here we actually do see a third option on the main menu which didn't make it into the final cut, and that's for viewing records. Unfortunately, it's not functional in this build and can't even be selected, but apparently, this option was going to show the players 5 best times that they got in the game. Additionally, there's another option on the main menu here that was cut from the final version of the game, and that's for enabling or disabling items in the Grand Prix races. Now, this option is actually again brought up in the interview from the Japanese strategy guide, where the devs outline why they decided to remove the option to disable items. If you've played Mario Kart games before, you know that items can take away a big chunk of the skill aspect of the games. So I think this still would have been a nice option to leave in so players themselves could choose how they wanted to play the game. And while we're on the title screen, it actually has a completely different audio track playing. It sounds like a pretty cool tune, and it's apparently a track from the Super Nintendo port of SimCity, just using different samples and instrumentation. Here's a quick sample of the track. And then here is what this track normally sounds like in SimCity. And then similarly, the track for the character selection screen is way different too. And finally, there are also 2 more music tracks that seem to play on only a few select courses. Here are both of the tunes. Definitely some pretty catchy tracks, and it's interesting that they've used songs from SimCity seemingly as placeholders in this build. Now, unfortunately at this time, this build hasn't been fully repaired yet, so it's still pretty buggy to play, with most courses just crashing out if you look at it wrong. But even so, for what is playable, we can notice numerous differences compared to the final game. Despite being seen in previous builds, there's no lakitu to put you back on the track if you fall out or tell you you're going the wrong direction. There's still no hopping or automatic drifting implemented in this build. The order of the tracks and which cup they're in is quite a bit different. And although I wasn't able to get to the end of a Grand Prix since the game kept crashing, apparently there's no award ceremony cutscene implemented here yet either. And many more smaller changes that if you'd like to read up on, head on over to the cutting room floor page, which will be linked in the description. And then last up for this build, although not fully playable or anything, there are references in the code to a total of 5 different battle modes: Test, 3 OBJ and Gun, Gate Race, Train, as well as a 5th unnamed slot. Now, aside from speculation, there's not too much known for most of these, save for Gate Race, and yeah, it's actually spelt like that here. Apparently, the idea for that one was that there would have been gates found around a track, and then players would have to race to reach them first, and whoever did would capture them and get a point. And it's believed that this would have been where this battle mode would have taken place, basically an unused maze-like layout of the Battle Course 1 map seen in the final game. But yeah, it's too bad that these modes weren't left in a repairable state, but hopefully one day we're able to learn more about the rest of these battle modes.